I definitely get a lot of comments of people who are freaked out about climate change and don't really know what to do. But of course, they're all people who are watching YouTube videos, so they're kind of centered in one perspective. But what is this kind of eco-anxiety or climate-related anxiety that exists?
Yeah, it's really about fear and hopelessness about what's happening related to the climate, how that's going to impact you, how that's going to impact your family, your friends, and generations to come. And we're seeing a lot of people become much more concerned about this. And I think what elevates it from normal fears and stress that we might all have about our planet to something that's like much more about anxiety is that hopelessness, feeling kind of stuck in your worries and not knowing what to do, or feeling like there's nothing that you can do.
Does it manifest in any kind of different way than, I don't want to say like run-of-the-mill anxiety, but like what we're more familiar with as like being anxious or having anxiety about something?
Yeah, it's, I think there's no real, let me back up. So there's no real psychiatric definition for eco-anxiety. It's not considered to be any type of disorder, but it is a new term that's come up to classify a lot of these type of fears. And it's probably most similar to something like generalized anxiety disorder, where we have a number of different worries about events in our life, day-to-day things that we have to do. And a lot of these worries keep us from making decisions. We might cope with them by procrastinating. We might cope with them by worrying a lot and then doing things like rumination, where we're just kind of churning these thoughts in our head over and over again. It might also lead to a lot of physical stress and feeling a lot of tension in your body, muscle tension, kind of tightness, and make you a little bit more vulnerable to developing illnesses, things like that. So it's probably most similar to that type of anxiety.
Okay. So what exactly brings it about? Because clearly there's a bunch of people in the world who are not anxious about climate change. Otherwise, we'd probably be doing a little bit more about it.
Well, that's a funny thing about climate anxiety is in some cases we want people to be more anxious about it. It's always hard when it comes to public health and preparedness and emergency responses to get people anxious. It's a really difficult thing to do because we are really wired to respond to what's happening right now, not what's going to happen 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10, 20 years down the road. So when there's like a blizzard coming or a tornado, or there's danger of fires or drought or all of that kind of stuff, but it's down the road, it's not immediate, it's really hard to get people anxious. And we want people to get anxious so they prepare and they act on it. And what often helps to get people ready for potential climate-related calamities. It sounds like it should be an acronym. What helps people to get prepared for what's going to happen in the climate is clear and consistent responses, clear, consistent messaging from elected officials, from family, from friends. And we don't have that as it relates to climate change right now. Like it's a politically polarized issue, so we're not getting clear messages from our leaders, and it's not something that friends and family are often talking about either. So yeah, I agree with you. It's something we want to get people more anxious about, so that they can prepare, but the political situation as it is making that really hard to do.
Then the question that immediately pops in mind is like, where is the balance between making people more anxious about climate change so they actually do something, and going too far so that they feel like frozen in fear and that there's too much and we can't do anything about it. Like it's the whole globe and I'm one person.
Yeah. I think that the question of balance is a really good one, and it's one that always comes up in any type of public outreach related to preparation. For me, it all comes down to hopelessness. We need to give people hope and something to do. So we want to make them very concerned about what's going to happen. And when it comes to anxiety, there's this little curve of anxiety, where a little bit of anxiety doesn't lead to any change. No one does anything differently. Too much anxiety and people feel paralyzed, or they might start to think in a very catastrophic way, and they might get stuck and paralyzed. But a healthy amount of anxiety moves people to action, to preparation. And that's what we really want to get people towards. So yeah, we want to raise the anxiety to a point where it's helping people move forward, but then give them something to do and give them hope, because there are actual tangible things that everyone can do when it comes to climate change, to prepare themselves for what's about to come and what is actually happening right now. We're really wired to notice quick changes that are happening in our environment. That's what thousands and thousands of years of evolution have wired our psychology to do. We're not very good at noticing slow changes. And a lot of what's happening with climate change has been slow changes that we're very slowly getting used to, like a frog boiling in a pot. It's that's kind of what's happening to all of us. So we gotta raise that anxiety and then give people hope and give them tangible things that they can do. So I think back to my time, or I think back to growing up as a Californian and having lived through the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. Which really impacted Northern California. And it was something that was immediate. People felt the impact of it, both in terms of families, of schools, of infrastructure, something that was really on the mind of everyone. And what happened in the years after that, we had earthquake drills all the time at school. So yeah, that raises anxiety. That this is a possibility, and it also gives you something to do. So we learned how to duck and cover. We learned where you should stand in a room if there is no table that you can hide around. We all had, as a part of school projects, we had to make disaster plans. Like what are our families going to do? There were changes in terms of regulations of building and new codes that were created to make buildings much more resilient to earthquakes. So a lot of that stuff happened because there was this real tangible danger that could come at any time. And when it comes to preparing for climate change, we need similar kind of things. We need to raise the anxiety. We need to have drills. We need to have kits. We need to have plans. We need to change the way we're planning our cities and our environments. And a lot of that stuff requires our leadership to get behind it, but not all of it does. There's a lot of stuff we can do on our own with our friends and family to get ready for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I guess this maybe will get maybe a little too meta, but I spend a lot of time in classes where I bounce between very hard dynamics of climate science classes and risk perception classes, and for me there's a very clear bit where they don't mesh, in that I go to one class where they talk about how all of these storms and fires aren't necessarily a direct link to climate change, and it's important for us as scientists to question whether or not there's a link there. Whereas you go to the risk perceptions class and they're like, that doesn't matter. We don't care if this is actually caused by climate change. We need people to be ready because we know that there's going to be more of these disastrous events. So how much, if at all, should that be playing into how anxious we're trying to get people, or how we're trying to walk people back from being overly anxious or too doomsday scenario-y?
That's like a whole video.
I know,
so
right?
Does it matter?
Yeah.
Does it matter? And
I'm gonna make a video about that.
does it matter what we call it? So one of the things that is happening in many parts of the world, but here in the United States, is we are experiencing these weather disasters, these natural disasters with greater frequency or intensity. Hurricanes have hit Puerto Rico before, but nothing like what we just saw. Here in New York, Hurricane Sandy was just a level higher than anything we've seen, and we're seeing the fires now in California. Which, like, to what degree are they related to climate change? Who knows? At the same time, since all of this stuff is happening, there's so much opportunity for us to prepare for these things, to have plans in place that weave in mental health, so that we're more resilient, better able to respond, better able to deal with these things and bounce back. There's so much opportunity for that. Like, just a small example, disaster kits that people are encouraged to make. Food, water, medications, things like that. Yeah, that all makes sense. But how to weave in things that are going to help you emotionally cope? How to weave in things that are going to help you to regulate your emotions, maintain some type of connection to your home, to your family, like actual photos of loved ones. If we lose electricity, your photos are gone, or at least you can't see them at that point, but having something that's actually printed out that gives you a connection to your family, to your home, to your identity, those kind of things are really important if we're going to be temporarily or permanently displaced from our homes. So there's just so much opportunity for us to weave in good psychological preparation regardless of what we're going to be experiencing, because we are going to be experiencing more stuff. What's causing that? Who knows? And maybe that's just being caused by us growing as a species and growing in places that we haven't been before, which is maybe some of the stuff that's going on in Southern California right now with the fires is we just keep pushing out, we keep growing. Or in Houston, a lot of the flooding that resulted from the hurricane was human-made problem, with us building homes in a place that is more prone to flooding now, or building in a way that makes it more prone to flooding. So there's a lot that we can do regardless of what the cause is, and that's something that can unite people politically, is when we focus on these shared values of safety. That's something that's not a conservative or liberal value, that's not a Republican or Democrat value, that crosses the political spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot of why we're seeing storms or events that we haven't ever seen before, is just because there's people there where there wasn't before. Yeah. And that's like a big measure of risk, is will it actually affect people? Because if like a massive superstorm hits the coast of Maine where there's no one, it's fine, some trees fall down. right. But if it hits New York City, that's like a completely different story. In terms of like how much people care, how worried they get. So that's definitely very real.
And it also stresses existing vulnerabilities. And we saw that in Puerto Rico, where the infrastructure was really out of date. And as that whole power network was knocked out, now we have a massive humanitarian crisis that's just made more problematic based on the existing infrastructure, which was a problem. So while the death toll of the initial hurricane wasn't as high as people predicted, we now have a massive problem because of access to hospitals, roads that are blocked off, medications, just something as simple as like insulin for people who have diabetes. Well, if you don't have a refrigerator, you don't have power to your refrigerator, what are you going to do? And if you can't get more insulin because the road, the path to get that is gone, then what do you do? So we have more people in more places, and we also in many parts of the world have infrastructure that are not really ready for massive climate related things.
That's definitely true. I guess that kind of gets a little bit into the perception of environmentally related anxieties, and that I have read a bunch of articles that are kind of slamming this idea, and that it's just a bunch of wealthy white liberals that are just running around freaking out but not really doing anything to change their lives. Whereas if you look at a lot of the research, it's really looking at frontline communities that are how anxious are they about living next to a chemical plant or a coal plant, or they just survived Hurricane Katrina and that kind of stuff.
Wealthy people who have a lot of means, their anxiety versus people on the front lines who are more vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to belittle some very legitimate anxieties of someone who is better off being really worried about the climate.
Yeah.
But I have seen that kind of used like as a double-edged sword to be like, oh, they care, but they're not really doing anything, while completely disregarding this whole spectrum of people who are experiencing perhaps different, perhaps related to like really strong traumas.
Yeah.
And it's like, I've said eco-anxiety a lot of times now because it's like the easiest word for me to recall, but that's partly because I've read so much slamming it as like a fake thing.
Mm-hmm. You know, people might not think of it as eco-anxiety, but people who were in Michigan and didn't have access to clean water had a lot of anxiety related to their environment. And these kind of things, anything that happens in the environment tends to impact our most vulnerable populations the most. So definitely kids, women who are pregnant, the elderly, people who live in parts of cities and towns that might have lower real estate value, people who don't have the means to be able to easily move or just go away for the weekend. It's those type of communities that are hardest hit by natural disasters or by changes in water supply or by drought or extreme heat or extreme cold. Those are the communities that are most impacted by it. We might not label that, or people in those communities might not label it as eco-anxiety, but you bet they're experiencing higher rates of anxiety, of hopelessness, of PTSD. We saw that with Hurricane Katrina. Years down the road, we'll probably see that with Puerto Rico. Absolutely. So these communities are very hard hit, both immediately, but then also in the aftermath. So if your home is knocked out, people have a strong sense of identity and connection and meaning associated with their home. And so if you're forced to move, you lose that sense of identity, you lose that sense of connection, but also you're more vulnerable to not having access to your support network, your friends and family. So if you're in a FEMA shelter, or you are migrating away, trying to find a better home elsewhere or a safer home, you are not going to have access to the people that help you. And that is the number one thing that helps people recover from traumas, is access to social support. And when you're isolated or you have less access, you're really in danger of developing more problems down the road. So no, it's something that does affect everyone, regardless of how we might describe it, and regardless of whether we describe it as eco-anxiety or not.
One of the easiest, quote-unquote, ways that economists like to look at fixing climate change is you take all of the former coal workers in Appalachia and you move them to where the solar jobs are. You move them where the wind jobs are. But of course, people don't want to do that, and that's like, along with a whole host of other reasons, that's why there's a lot of unemployment there, and that region is so particularly hostile to, well, it's split a little bit, but there's a very large contingent of that population that's kind of hostile to environmental movements. So there's like that form of eco-anxiety in terms of like either using it to solve a problem or it being the big barrier to solving a problem. And then the other way is to kind of dive more into the vulnerable populations balance, and that how in your messaging do you get the people who perhaps have greater means to do something about climate be more anxious while helping the folks that are experiencing like day-to-day trauma of living in those spaces. So that's the two forks that your answer gave me.
And those are two really important parts of this.
Oh yeah. But they definitely go in different directions. Do you have a preference for which one you want to talk about?
No, we can tackle both.
Okay.
And then see
how they come back around.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not like we're paying for tape.
That's true. Thank goodness. Just like, it's got a 128 gigabyte memory card in there. We could go for hours.
We'll just keep going. We'll spend all day. You'll have fun editing that.
Yeah, I know. It's fun. It's great. I mean, at the rate I put up videos, it's like, if I have more footage, it gives me an excuse to why it takes me so long. Okay. So yeah, I guess let's come back to the first one I mentioned.
Yeah.
After, and that be like, so there's obviously these vulnerable populations who are experiencing real trauma, like almost day to day in some places, if they're like next to a coal plant or next to a chemical plant that's could leak, like we saw after Houston, or they're breathing terrible air all the time. And they might not call it eco-anxiety, but they're definitely experiencing, or most likely experiencing, some kind of anxiety related to their environment. How do we simultaneously get the messaging out to, take care of these people who are experiencing such hardship while raising the anxiety of people who are using those resources that they have to sit next to the fence of, the electricity and all that stuff? Like, where it's another question about the balance, and that how do you communicate? Some people need to worry about it a lot more, and some people who are already worried about it, they need to be taken care of so that they don't have to stress so much.
Yeah. It's a really tough question. So when it comes to helping communities prepare for changes in the environment, when it comes to helping communities to make changes that improve the health in a sustainable way. That, again, our favorite word. Like, what does sustainable mean? I don't know. We sort of have to think about what are people's motivations. Like, what are they motivated? Why are they motivated to think a certain way? So, for example, if someone does not want to leave their home, even though it might be next to a place that can produce a lot of pollution, that makes it super unhealthy for them. Like, why would they not want to move? Similarly, why would someone fight the closing of some type of coal plant? Those are the kind of things we have to think about, and I think we haven't really had a lot of great discussions about that kind of stuff. People have very strong connections to land and homes. It's a big part of our identity. It's what makes the Israel-Palestinian conflict such a big one. It's a conflict about land and about identity and about home and all of that. And that's why you can't just pick up a group of people and move them someplace, especially with a lot of indigenous populations. Culture, home, land, beliefs, those are all sort of tied together. We need to understand each group involved and why they might want to stick with the status quo, and probably have different messages or different discussions with each of those groups. The overarching value here that we all share is, again, about safety, about value, making things cheaper, better, more safe. Like, those are values we can all get behind, whether you're in business, in the energy sector, or if you work in some type of energy plant, or if you live in a local community. Like, we all share that. But the things that keep us in these environments or keep us from getting too concerned about making changes are different for each group. So it's a very long, vague answer that I don't even know if I answered your question.
I mean, you did a real good job of taking those two forks and tying them in a bow together, though, honestly. I mean, it like, because it gets to why people, I mean, whether it's an attachment to home or, like, economically they can't sell their home because no one wants to live there.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I'm sure there's also definitely a lot of attachment to, like, if they grew up there and stuff like that. But it gets really to the point of how we can't necessarily solve these areas that, since coal is not as profitable or profitable at all anymore, are losing jobs, but they don't want to move for a whole lot of reasons, versus the people who are, I mean, it's pretty fair to say, like, forced to live in these areas based on, like, age-old segregation laws and economic line drawing and whatnot. So, I mean, I think we did a pretty good job.
There's a lot of stuff that is tangible like economic structures and job opportunities and mobility issues that keep people there. There's a lot of intangible things as well related to identity, your community, that keep people there as well. And there's a lot. You can't just change a energy sector. You can't just change an industry like that. As much as we wish we could, we can't. And so that brings up a whole lot of problems. I have a lot of hope and optimism about all of this. What I'm constantly reminded about is, if you look at our evolutionary history, the greatest period of growth of the frontal lobe, of the part of the brain that is helped us become the species who we are, the most advanced part of our brain. The greatest period of development there happened during a period of massive climate change on our planet. And I think being able to cope and adapt to environments is so inherent in who we are as a species. We live all over the planet, and it's probably because of massive climate change that we are the species who we are. So we've dealt with this kind of stuff before. The problem now is we are so interdependent, and the type of stuff that got us through the last period of major climate change on our planet might not work now, because we were small groups and small tribes, and we're really built for that. We're built to function in these small communities, but now we're much more of an interdependent global community where one thing in one part of the world does impact something in another part of the world, and we're just not wired to be able to make those type of to negotiate those type of social situations. That's really hard for us. It's really, really hard to scale up the type of helping behavior and community support that is so a part of our DNA, where something happening in America impacts something happening in South America, which impacts Asia, and all of this. Like, that is not something that is easy for us. It actually comes quite difficult with the tribalism that is so at the core of how we think. So this is the challenge for our generation, for the next generation, for the generation after that, is how do we overcome our tribalism and tap into that ability to adapt to change at a global level.
Yeah. How?
Just that easy thing.
Right, I mean, it's not that hard. I mean, I guess, this is maybe off the rails a little bit, but how much psychological development has happened between that time and now? Like, is this rapid climate change that we're having now this is speculative.
Yeah.
Gonna change how we think as a species, do you think?
It might at some point. One of the conversations I always have with everyone I work with when I'm treating anxiety is we're dealing with thousands and thousands of years of old programming that is now being applied to an environment that is totally different from which it involved. It doesn't make sense to get massive anxiety about an exam, but for some people that's crippling, and it's because of this programming we have to survive attacks from animals and stuff like that. So how much has our psychology changed? Not too much. A lot of the ways that we dealt, our ancestors thousands of years ago dealt with emotions. We sort of had the same kind of thing that's happening now. We still have the same basic needs. We still have the same basic ways of coping. It hasn't changed too much. Evolution doesn't happen. Evolutionary change does not happen as quick as technological change.
For sure.
And we're dealing with a lot of technological change, a lot of changes in the ways that we travel, like air travel, for example. We haven't evolved an ability to rapidly adjust to changes in time zones. We haven't. No. And like our future Martian astronauts. There's so much of Earth-like conditions that we have to create for them to be able to travel to Mars. Like we're not used to and have not adapted to a lot of the things that we can do now. So not much evolution has happened for our.
I kind of figured. Yeah, because I guess like the last time we experienced a major shift in the Earth's climate, it happened over tens of thousands of years, whereas it's happening in basically lifetimes.
Yeah.
Which is a lot for a single person, let alone a generation of people to deal with.
And let alone for different nation states to deal with that have different motivations, different environments, different access to resources, different relationships with other nation states. That's where all this stuff gets so complicated.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess to kind of wrap it all up in a nice little, not necessarily satisfying bow, but like say you are experiencing a lot of climate-related or environment-related anxiety, what should you do about it? Is there a...
Yeah, so you're not alone. We all are to some degree, and that's normal. It's healthy. The thing to know is, what do we do about it? So what doesn't help is when people get stuck in these patterns of worry that just kind of churns over and over, and you feel helpless and you don't feel like you can do anything about it. So to kind of break that pattern, what I help people to understand is there something you can do about it? And the answer for that is yes. Sometimes people struggle with worries and there's nothing you can do about it. You turned in your paper, the professor is going to grade it, the teacher is going to grade it. There's nothing left to do. And then it's more about acceptance skills and how to be able to tolerate the uncertainty of that, how to be able to come to terms and let go some of that struggle. But that's not where we are with climate change and the environment. There's a lot that we can do. So number one is take steps that help you prepare for these types of situations. So number one is definitely having some type of disaster preparedness kit in your home. And that's for whatever you are likely to experience in your environment. And so we're here in New York City, so we might get a superstorm, or there might be we might be cut off from access. Like if something hits New York, subways are down, tunnels are closed, bridges are closed, so we might be stuck in this environment for a long time. That might be very different from someone who's watching this and living on an island. They might have different set of issues. Well, we're on an island too. Manhattan's I always forget that Manhattan's an island.
It's like connected to the land, perhaps artificially.
Yeah. Or if you're in an area that might be prone to a fire, or if you're in an area that's prone to tornado, hurricane, things like that. It's what do you need to have ready in your home, and include things that are going to help you to emotionally cope. So a lot of us use music or apps or things like that help us to emotionally cope. Like maybe you go on YouTube and you watch a funny Ellen video where she's like pranking someone, and that like cheers you up. But if internet is down, if power is down, what's a version of that you can have with you to help you cope? Is it going to be like a book? Is it going to be some kind of like board game? Is it going to be printed out photos of loved ones, of family, of things like that? So have some type of kit, but that also includes an emotional element to help you cope with the intense emotions that you might experience. And then number two, it's also about having a plan with your family, with your loved ones. And something that is going to get you connected also with your local community. So when Hurricane Sandy hit here, if you were below a certain part of Manhattan, you did not have power, and you might not have access to water too. And what we saw happen over there is a lot of people who were in lower Manhattan were connecting with friends and family that were more uptown and did have power. So when it comes to any type of climate-related disaster, being able to connect to your larger community is critical, absolutely critical, just in terms of being able to get access to a safe shelter, being able to get access to power, to water, to things like that. So it's not something you can do alone. No way. And that's something our ancestors did do when they lived in small tribes and they were experiencing massive climate change. They supported one another, and we need to evoke that same kind of thing now. So what are communities, what are friends, what are families in your local environment with whom you could connect with? And those are just very simple things that we can all do to prepare for this. And the other thing is to definitely talk to people about all of this and to talk to people about your fears, about your concerns. There's more research coming out now about how there are network effects where if you talk to someone you work with, you talk to someone you go to school with, how that actually impacts the whole network of people that you're connected to. So this is a real tangible difference that you can make, and it's actually critical to any type of preparation and policy change is actually just having these conversations, because they do have ripple effects in your social network and everyone you're connected to.
Cool. No, that's perfect. I guess kind of a personal question, is there, or personal to my interests, is there any value in terms of like any value or detriment in terms of making anxiety worse or better in like learning more about it? Yeah.
Well, I always, my day job is to help people with anxiety. It's my area of interest. It's what I love. I'm a New Yorker, so I guess anxiety is a big part of my life too. And something I always tell people is I want you to have the facts. Regardless of what your fears are, I want you to know what is realistic, what the best research tells us, to make sure that the decisions you're making are based on actual hard data and not what your anxiety is telling you. So like a real simple example, when I'm working with people who might have like a bug phobia, when you are just when you've avoided like a bee, let's say. I've got a bee phobia, so
I'm super allergic to bees, so I identify with that strongly.
Right? Yeah. So I made a video about that, about facing that fear. And one of the big things for me, since I had avoided bees, is my thought was they're gonna come right at me and just sting me over and over again. And the reality is, and when you actually do the treatment that helps you to like get closer to bees, that's not what they're doing. They're so much more interested in the flowers than they are you. And it's true of like spider phobia. Like when people have spider phobia, they think that spiders run up towards you and then they're going to bite you, when in actuality most spiders actually run away from you. They don't want to be anywhere near you. Mm-hmm. So we want to help people be armed with information that's realistic. So looking up information is super helpful, until and unless you get stuck in these patterns of trying to get more reassurance, of trying to learn more information that's just leading to more worries. Like when you get trapped in these patterns of just looking up more and it's not really leading to anything, and you're having a hard time with these worries, and you're just getting stuck in this loop, that's a problem. And that's where we want to reduce that and help you to move to some type of action, to actually do something and move you closer to making a positive change, which is maybe preparation, maybe it's talking to other people, maybe it's getting connected with a larger community. Those kind of things are going to help to reduce some of those worries. So yes, look up more information. until that starts to get in the way of your life. When it does, we want to help you to move more towards action.
Thank you so much for joining me and hanging out on my channel.
Thanks for
a
having
little
me.
bit. Where can people watch more of your stuff, find you on the internet?
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel called The Psych Show where I try to make psychology fun and easy to understand. So you can check that out at The Psych Show. Also on Twitter at AliMatu. That'll get you to me. And I'd love to hear what you think about all this stuff and continue the conversation because it's important and good, and we should talk about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, definitely let us know if you are experiencing any kind of environmental related anxiety or trauma and how you cope with that or don't. And I'll be hanging out in the comments forever because I just hang out on the internet.